Earlier this summer, I finally had the opportunity to take a trip to the Holy Land of Coasters, a place like no other, the roller coast Cedar Point. This park of many nicknames absolutely lives up to the hype, and for as much as I wanted to vlog my whole experience there, I also really wanted to live in the moment at Cedar Point. So even though I vlogged sometimes, I didn't get to tell the whole story while at the park. So this is my experience at Cedar Point, half park review, half vlog, from Thursday, July 9th and Friday, July 10th, 2020. Luckily, I have some newfound friends who are also coaster enthusiasts, whose idea it was to take a trip to Ohio. They are Ryan at Stinger Thrills, Taylor at Maverick Motion, and our buddy Zach who drove. So give them all follows on Instagram. We all live in eastern Pennsylvania and left at 1:30 a.m. for our 7 to 8 hour drive to Sandusky, Ohio. Even though I went to bed around 7 p.m. the night before, I couldn't get a wink of sleep before our big day.
In 2.2 miles, arrive at Cedar Point.
Let's go! We arrived at Cedar Point around 9 a.m. and I must say, the drive onto the peninsula is absolutely incredible. It's amazing how flat the landscape is, surrounded by Lake Erie, all with massive 100-foot tall coasters protruding from the earth. It was a spectacular sight. July 9th was opening day for Cedar Point, so visiting that day wasn't the best plan on our part, because the park was just getting used to all of the new safety procedures due to the pandemic. One problem we had right away was getting into the park. Our reservations were for 10:30 a.m. instead of 10 a.m., and I thought the earliest available was 10:30. So apparently there was a 10 a.m. reservation time that we, I guess, didn't reserve soon enough.
How's that possible?
We're all 10:30, so now we went from the front of this line to the back. Yikes. So even though we were some of the first 20 people in line, we were asked to go all the way to the back of the line behind about 1,000 other people. Not the best way to start our day. By the time we got back up to the employee who had asked us to go to the back of the line in the first place, she wasn't even checking reservations anymore. So I don't know what that was about, but yeah, not great. But we dealt with it, got into the park a little bit later than anticipated, and of course headed for Steel Vengeance, the 200-foot tall hyper-hybrid coaster built by RMC. Steve, or Stevie for short, is an incredible sight, once you can actually see it after that mile walk all the way to the back of the park. We ended up waiting just over an hour for a middle row ride on Steel Vengeance, Cedar Point's iconic Rocky Mountain masterpiece. And yeah, I was amazed, like I knew I would be. But was it my favorite coaster right away? Well, not quite. I knew it was one of the greatest coasters I've ever been on, but I wasn't entirely sure if I liked it better than El Toro yet. Every element was amazing, the pacing is out of this world, and the ride feels like it never ends. But I guess for some reason, my high expectations were met, but not quite exceeded. So although I was impressed, I mostly knew what to expect going in, so my mind wasn't boggled. Like I said, I still knew it was a legendary coaster. 10 out of 10, but still right behind El Toro. For now. We then got an access pass for Maverick to return later, and went to the original hypercoaster Magnum XL200. Originally, the wait was only supposed to be 15 minutes, but due to social distancing on the trains and a breakdown, we ended up waiting close to an hour. But it was definitely worth it. Even though Magnum was definitely not one of the greatest hypers I've ever been on, it was still very fun. I sat in the very last row, and the airtime was absolutely out of control. But Magnum is about 30 years old, and you can really feel the pain of those aero transitions. Not to mention the trims going into the Batwing turnaround, which hit very hard. I still enjoyed it much more than my group did. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. On our way back towards Maverick, I got the kiddie credit on Woodstock Express, a Vekoma Junior coaster. I only got in line because there was just one family waiting to get on, but what I thought was going to be a 5-minute wait turned into a 25-minute wait due to some of the slowest, most tedious train disinfecting I have ever seen. I should have kept recording because this video doesn't quite do it justice. As for the ride itself, it's a one and done. It's a kiddie coaster. 2 out of 10. Eventually I got the credit and we arrived at Maverick, an Intamin multi-launch blitz coaster. Even though we had an access pass, we still waited almost an hour and a half. Like I said, Cedar Point was still figuring out how to operate, so I don't think the access pass made a difference. I know I say this a lot, but the wait for Maverick was 1000% worth it. I was lucky enough to get another back row ride with Taylor at Maverick Motion. Needless to say, it was one of the most life-changing rides I have ever experienced on a coaster. It's one of those experiences that we live for as enthusiasts. A moment where you realize you're riding one of the greatest coasters in the world. I'm not sure why I didn't have the same feeling on Steel Vengeance, probably because I didn't get that back row ride yet, and because my expectations for Maverick were much lower. I knew it was a great launch coaster going in, but I didn't realize that it was likely the best launch coaster in the world. or at least the best that I've ridden so far. That ride on Maverick was so good that it inspired Taylor's account name, Maverick Motion, named after his new #1 coaster. Every element on Maverick is insane, many giving ejector airtime I did not expect. From the first drop, which flung me out of my seat, to the launch out of the tunnel, which was probably the quickest moment of acceleration I've ever felt on a launch coaster, and of course the Stangle Dive, which gives the best lateral ejector forces I've ever felt. Maverick was relentless, and I was bewildered. It gives me chills just thinking about that ride. And while sitting on the brake run, I thought to myself, whoa, did I like this better than Steel Vengeance? And after that first day, I did like it better than Steve. And here are my initial thoughts on Maverick. So I rode Maverick about, 20, 25 minutes ago now. That is easily the best launch coaster I've ever been on in my entire life. That thing hauls. This thing is one of the funnest, most exciting, and unexpected roller coasters I've ever ridden in my entire life. Look at it go. That's one of my favorite coasters. I may like that better than Steel Vengeance. I'm really not sure. I need another ride on Stevie. But yeah, that thing was crazy. I need a back row ride on Steel Vengeance, but Maverick, I was not expecting that at all. 10 out of 10, Maverick is without a doubt my favorite launch coaster ever. After our unbelievable ride, we fueled up with some Chick-fil-A for lunch, which to my surprise was very reasonably priced. Speaking of the park itself, Cedar Point is very obviously oriented to thrill seekers, as most of the park is just full of giant steel thrill machines. There are some family-friendly areas and a very well-themed western area where Maverick and Steel Vengeance are, but that's about the only heavily immersive area. Regardless, there is a palpable energy of pure excitement and adrenaline at Cedar Point, which is just impossible to ignore. Soon after lunch, my phone and portable charger both died after taking so many videos, so luckily Ryan at Stinger Thrills let me borrow his phone to take footage for the rest of the day. We then made our way to the legendary Millennium Force, which we had an access pass for. We just barely made it in time and waited just under an hour. Ryan and I waited for the front row because why not? And my first ever Giga was almost as breathtaking as my ride on Maverick. It was close to sunset, so the view over the lake was just stunning, and climbing that 310-foot tall lift hill with practically nothing on either side of you is so freeing and intimidating at the same time. Finally, we crested the lift hill and descended into one of my all-time favorite drops on a coaster. It feels like it lasts forever, and from there on, you just continue to pick up an insane amount of speed and intensity, and somehow, even in the front row, we got airtime. Over every single hill, I would call it true flowjector airtime. Not quite as strong as Maverick's ejector, but also not quite as gentle as a B&M Hyper's floater. The whole ride I felt like a cartoon character riding a roller coaster, because my mouth was wide open and my cheeks were pressed back to my jawline. It baffles me how people can dare call this Millennium Forceless.
Millennium Forceless.
Because it was easily one of the most intense coasters I've ever ridden. I give Millie a 9.5 out of 10. The last ride of the day was on my first ever aero suspended coaster, Iron Dragon. It was only about a 15-minute wait, and I actually had a lot of fun on this. Granted, the first half is a little bit boring, but after the second lift hill, it turns into sort of a twister layout full of so many great moments of lateral forces as the cars sway violently back and forth. Solid family coaster, I give it a 6 out of 10. We wanted to hit one of the B&Ms in the front of the park before the park closed, but a heavy storm was approaching, so all the rides closed about a half an hour before the park closed, so Iron Dragon concluded our day. We stayed at Hotel Breakers, the on-site hotel at Cedar Point. Even though it was very expensive, I'm glad we did it. Here are my initial thoughts on Cedar Point after our first day. Oh man, long, great day at Cedar Point. I actually only got on 6 coasters. We started the day with Steel Vengeance, which was phenomenal. I think I was expecting it to be great, so then therefore, my middle row ride wasn't that tremendous. It was amazing because it was Steel Vengeance. I'm still not sure if I necessarily like it better than El Toro, but I have it at my number 2 right now. Right after that, we went on Magnum, got back row. That was pretty out of control, but a little rickety, a little rough. I got on a kiddie credit that I did not think I was going to get. The girl took forever sanitizing that. That was ridiculous. She was like Myrtle the Turtle, tediously scrubbing each and every seat, even the ones that nobody even sat in. But right after that was our back row ride on Maverick, and that was berserk. That was out of this world. But then we got a front row ride on Millennium Force, and that was fantastic too. So, this park's top 3 is nothing to mess around with. I really thought, Steel Vengeance was the star of the show, and then Maverick and Millennium Force were just the obvious supporting cast, which I really think that Maverick and Steel Vengeance are right on the same playing field. I'm going to need a back row ride on Steel Vengeance to know that, but holy crap, Maverick was insane. Millennium Force blew me away. I got the seat to the left, right on Lake Erie. I've seen that POV for years and years now, and it looked so scary. But, oh my God, it was awesome. Just absolutely life-changing, awesome day. And then we finished off our day on Iron Dragon, which I had never been on an aero suspended coaster, and that was super fun as well. I didn't expect much from that, but we got really great swinging in the second half. Overall, it was such a great day. The lines were pretty long. That's the other thing too. There was a lot of closures today. I think they're understaffed. So Gemini wasn't open, Corkscrew, Wicked Twister, Blue Streak, and of course Top Thrill Dragster. I think it was open for the first 5 minutes and then broke down. Let's see how tomorrow goes. Peace out. Can you see why I didn't vlog that whole time? Anyway, after that terrible excuse of a vlog, we got dinner at TGI Fridays, which, like the hotel, was overpriced. But the food and drinks were popping after such a great day.
We drank beer. I liked beer. Still like beer.
Hotel Breakers sits right next to its own private beach on the shore of Lake Erie, which is where you can get up close and personal to Gatekeeper and Wicked Twister. I decided to get up bright and early around 6 a.m. just after sunrise to get some footage of the beach and shoreline coasters. I'll be making a separate video like this to showcase my morning walk on the shore of Lake Erie, but I'll tell you this, I got so much closer than I thought I could to a different coaster on the shore, Magnum XL200. There I got even better shots than I did of Gatekeeper and Wicked Twister, so stay tuned for that future video. Day 2 started with the best perk of staying on site at Cedar Point, entering the park through the side entrance near Magnum XL200. Under normal, non-pandemic conditions, resort guests usually get early access into the park, but they weren't doing that while we were there. However, the side gates still gave us a tremendous advantage to get a good spot in line for Steel Vengeance, so when no one else would, I ran. I ran all the way back to Steel Vengeance while everyone else walked. I knew that I could be the very first one in line and get that back row ride that I so craved.
I'm Forrest Gump, and I was running for Jenny, for Stevie.
It was definitely the most cardio that I had done in months, but to my luck, I was the only non-employee anywhere close to Steel Vengeance by the time I got there. This was one of my proudest moments as a coaster enthusiast.
That's my credo, no regrets.
You have no regrets?
Dad?
No? Not even a single letter?
Our group was the first one on Steve that morning, and Ryan rode with me in the back row. I knew this ride would be better than the first, and oh man was it. The amount of whip you get over the first drop, sustained ejector over the first hill, sideways ejector over the second hill, hang time and laterals through the double barrel rolls, and on and on and on is just crazy. This ride was like nothing else. Now I will say that Steel Vengeance doesn't quite have the intensity of the legendary Intamins in the park, but I would call Steel Vengeance gracefully intense, as every element is executed to sheer perfection. Your thighs will know that this coaster has more moments of airtime than any other, because they were sore. But in my heart, sitting on that brake run, I knew that this was my new favorite coaster, #1 overall. I was so happy that I finally got that incredible ride on Steel Vengeance that everyone's high praise had hyped me up for. And now there was a new king in my coaster count, and his name is Steve.
Let's call it Steve.
Steve?
It's a pretty name.
Here was my reaction after that legendary ride.
So I ran here first thing in the morning. We got the side entrance from the hotel. We got in the side entrance. I ran here. I was first in line. That means we got first ride of the day, back row on Steel freaking Vengeance. Guess what? Guess what? This is my new #1. Sorry, ElToro. Move aside. Steel Vengeance is the king of coasters. This is my new #1. Look at this. Let's go.
After that ride, we still had the whole day ahead of us, and since we didn't get on any of them the day prior, we decided to head to the front of the park to ride the B&Ms, Gatekeeper, Raptor, and Valravn. We decided to start with Raptor since the Cedar Point app reported only a 30-minute wait, but like Magnum the day before, we ended up waiting much longer than expected, closer to an hour and a half. Raptor was a very solid invert in my opinion. It was very intense with many great elements, and to me felt like a larger scale Batman clone. I think my favorite part was the helix towards the end, but looking back I really wish this wasn't such a long wait. Good B&M invert. I ranked it #3 out of the inverts I had ridden behind Montu and Great Bear. I give Raptor a 9 out of 10. We then saw Corkscrew running with passengers on it for the first time during our trip, so we decided to get in line. Not long after though, storm clouds began rolling in, and we got rained out of line for the first time that day. This would be a recurring theme. I didn't end up getting the credit on Corkscrew, which was disappointing given its history as the first coaster with 3 inversions, but I'm sure I didn't miss much. Waiting for the rain to pass, we got Panda Express for lunch, which was solid, but not as cheap as Chick-fil-A the day before. Once the first storm cleared, we tried our hand at Valravn, Cedar Point's B&M dive coaster, which was one of the first coasters to start testing after the rain. We waited about 30 to 40 minutes once the line reopened, and we even got to see a train transfer. But just when we thought the rain had cleared, out came another, less intense storm, with luckily no lightning. So we ended up getting a front row rain ride on Valravn, which was very fun, albeit painful. Valravn definitely has a solid layout, longer duration, and more inversions than the other dive coaster I've ridden, SheiKra at Busch Gardens Tampa. However, I still prefer SheiKra because it has the older B&M restraints, which allow you to feel much more of the forces, which are restricted on Valravn because of the newer vest restraints. Still a great ride, Valravn is definitely an 8.5 out of 10 in my book. At this point, it was more than halfway through our day, and some rides were still closed from the first storm. But I was hellbent on getting on a B&M wing coaster for the first time, so we headed over to Gatekeeper even though it was closed at that time. We waited about an hour outside of the queue for the ride to reopen, but eventually I had to get up and walk around, so I decided to hit up the gift shop. I bought a nice model Parkscape of Cedar Point for $30 because I couldn't decide on any one nano coaster because they're all so good. That ended up being my only souvenir from Cedar Point. But while I was in the gift shop is of course when Gatekeeper reopened, and my group actually got 2 rides on it without me. Yeah, I was admittedly very angry, but luckily the line wasn't too long when I got back, and I only waited about 15 minutes for my lone ride on Gatekeeper. I sat towards the back, and I must say this was very fun. I didn't expect how terrifying the first drop would be, inverting in on yourself, and all the other elements are taken so gracefully with a good pacing. The near-miss keyhole elements are super cool, but I think my favorite moments of the ride were just before, when there's an airtime hill and corkscrew, both of which were smooth and forceful. The B&M vest restraint did not bother me as much as it did on Valravn, but my real quarrel with Gatekeeper is that I got stuck on the brake run for almost 20 minutes after my ride. But luckily I got that ride on it just before it broke down, so I did finally get that elusive wing coaster credit. And because I got stuck on the brake run, I actually got a free skip the line pass for my trouble, so I'll be sure to use it in the future, but it still wasted a lot of our time that day. Gatekeeper is still solid, 8.5 out of 10. With dwindling time left in our visit and impending thunderstorms on the horizon, we booked it back to the middle of the park and tried to get one more ride on Millennium Force. It was almost 7 o'clock when we got in line for Millie, and soon after is when it started to rain, thunder and lightning included. Naturally, the ride closed, and many people exited the queue, but we were all in trying to get one more ride, so we ended up waiting another half an hour in the pouring rain. Once 7:30 came and more thunder rumbled, we knew that our day was over, as most coasters usually take 30 minutes to reopen after lightning strikes. Half an hour from then was when the park was supposed to close at 8 o'clock, and Millennium Force was likely closed for the night. Here's a look at just how wet we got.
We waited for Millennium for like 20 minutes in the soaking rain. We are soaked. Our shoes are drenched. Brutal.
So obviously this wasn't the way we wanted to end our trip, and we missed out on many other new credits like Top Thrill Dragster, Gemini, Rougarou, amongst others. Even with that, I can't complain. The roller coaster really showed us what weather is like right next to Lake Erie, but it was still a spectacular experience. Even though I only got 10 total rides on 9 new coasters in 2 days, 3 of those coasters cracked my top 10, 2 of them are in my top 3, and 1 of them is my new number 1. So yeah, that's a successful trip in my book. Cedar Point is an incredible park with what many, including myself, believe to be the best coaster lineup in the country, if not the world. Our trip didn't quite go as planned, but it was still worth every penny spent and every minute waiting in line. Cedar Point, I'll see you again soon. So what do you think of Cedar Point? Leave a comment down below your thoughts on the roller coaster and how your experience there compared to mine. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like to help the channel grow, and of course subscribe to Coaster John for more content like this in the future. Until next time, ride on.